Welcome to the Cassilly Chronicles. Gail Soliwoda Cassilly. She's a talented artist, a teacher, and one of the founders of City Museum. Also, my mom. I'm Max Cassilly. Here she is sharing a story with me about the time before I existed when she was a nun on a mission to Malawi, Africa. That's East Africa. Starting an art program for a girls' school.
I had been in Africa, I guess, for almost 3 years. So, of course, I hadn't seen my family in 3 years. And they decided, actually, it was my grandma Poplaski, whose idea, of all people, was to come to Africa. And she was in her 80s then. And so my mother and my sister and my grandmother were all supposed to come. And it turned out that my grandmother, because of her Polish descent, somehow could not get a visa to enter the country. It was very convoluted. I don't remember the exact reason why. But anyway, it was extremely disappointing for her and my mother and my sister. So it wound up that just the two of them came. And so, as was my custom during all these years of being away, I would write letters to my mother and tell her various things we needed for the art department or the nuns. Sometimes it might be a pair of stockings or scissors or who knows. So anyway, my mother, I told her to bring any kind of interesting food items she could think of that she was able to bring. So she brought shake and bake.
Grandma, can I help you make your special fried chicken?
If you can keep a secret, I use shake and bake now.
So we went to Mass in the village that night, and we had prepared the chicken with the shake and bake on it and set the chicken on a little counter in our little kitchen and went to Mass. And when we came back, I walked in first, and I saw the chicken looked really strange. There were a lot of black things on it. So it turned out the chicken was covered in ants.
Oh, no.
And they weren't big ants, but they were little ants. And so I kind of hid it so nobody would see it. Well, particularly my mother. She didn't see it. So when she was in the other room, I proceeded to try and shake the ants off.
You do?
Sure, I'll show you. First we shake, then we bake.
The chicken pieces as best as I could. Of course, lost some of the shake and bake. But anyhow, so my sister walked in and saw what I was doing, and I just said, don't tell Mom, whatever. So anyway, we wound up cooking the chicken with the ant residue
Chicken a la
on it.
ant.
And, we thought it was wonderful, and my mother never knew. All the better.
Oh, no, she did find out about it.
Well, probably after. I might have told her. My sister might have told her after.
I remember her hearing the story years later.
Yeah, so it was one of many little episodes.
Mother, why isn't my fried chicken as crispy and juicy? I want your recipe.
Welcome back to our space, fellow citizens. We will check back in with my mom a little bit later, but now let's set the stage. While I love to shoot from the hip, to riff and to share a laugh, there are times when reality steps in and the curtain behind the entertainment is pulled away. This isn't just another edutainment podcast. Here you dive into an authentic experience. My life has been a tapestry of artistic people, and let me tell you, they can be quite the characters. Join me, my wife Maria.
Hello.
And our friend Chris from St. Louis Patina.
Hi Max, how are you?
We've tried our best to keep this family friendly by bleeping out some colorful language if it occurs, but just as a heads up, content warnings are a thing here. And just to be clear, City Museum has its charm for kids. This podcast explores the deeper and sometimes darker sides of life, death, and everything in between. And as Mr. Charles would say, explore with your own discretion. Unlock ad-free episodes of the Cassilly Chronicles and dive deeper with exclusive digital content at patreon.com/capturedplant. Mr. Charles worked at the museum from day one, and he would do all the tours for the groups especially. Yeah.
He was the sort of unofficial tour guide.
Yeah.
He would also, on a personal note, he would also sing my name whenever he would see me, which was always lovely.
Yeah. So, in the first episode, we talked about the giant snake, a Burmese python that was 13 feet long, and how it showed up in my courtyard when I was about 12 years old. Well, after starting this and sending off the first episode, there was a guy who had video footage of my dad working throughout the years. and his name is Mark Silverman. And when I approached him, he got back with me, and we've been going through some footage of my dad, and in it is where the snake would have gone.
Inside the aquarium?
Inside the aquarium, the building, the World Aquarium, and I did find a video of a snake in there that they're filming. I'm thinking it's not the snake, because we do have a photo of the snake, and there's a different pattern on it. But it's a pretty big snake, but...
I love how there were multiple snakes then, is what that means.
Oh, yeah. There were.
Also, a teenage Max in that filming as well.
Yes. There's a lot of me slacking off in the background, certainly. And it's definitely... I haven't felt old till watching these. Yeah. Makes you realize how much time went by. Because they're almost... The videos are 20 years old, almost.
Wow.
The house that I grew up in, the Caroline Mission, as it's known, that's where, if City Museum started in a basement garage, it 100% started at the Caroline Mission, which was an old mission in Lafayette Square. When my parents bought the house, they actually bought 3 houses and split it with their friend J. Watson Scott. And he rehabbed one of the houses and sold it. And then my dad and his people rehabbed the house next door and sold it. And then they took the nice crown jewel of it, which was the Caroline Mission, and decked it out. And it had a whole bunch, like when you walk into the front door, there's a whole bunch of mirrors, and you don't really know which way you should go. And the mirrors are actually from Westport Plaza, the giant. There were some mirrors that were misprinted or something, so they recalled them, and my dad bought them for cheap and put them in the house. And
I didn't know that. That checks.
He made a table out of it, so our dining room table growing up was a giant mirror.
Sort of a yellow mirror.
Yeah, it was.
Or golden.
Yeah, say very golden. And they would break occasionally. So
No.
he would go pull them out from the basement storage.
And get new ones?
Yeah, he had like 10 of them down there waiting. Models set up there. That's where we would be playing, and he would be working on his stuff. And then it became like a play place for us.
So your parents definitely delineated, like, so how did they define their studios where they worked on, small models of what would eventually become very large items that would be
I'd say
worked
there
on
was
in the shop?
Yeah, you definitely do 1/6 scale, and then a 1/3 scale.
So like
maybe.
a little Modello or a Bozzetto would be worked on in the studio.
Or even on the front table, where we'd be
Eating
hey,
dinner.
Bob, clear off the table. We need to eat dinner.
And then you'd get that stuff done.
Yeah.
And then you take those Bozzetti over to the shop,
Correct.
where you then reinterpret and expand it to the full size, which in some cases would be, a dozen feet wide or tall.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's important for people to realize, is that each place where your parents worked had a different component to the artistic process.
Oh yeah, and everything bled into everything. So, at the shop, which we would call that, because that's where it was a lot more work time for parents too. I think that
Right.
that the stage was set a little bit, and we'd hang out and draw stuff on paper on the floor, and go pick up trash outside, and go buy some junk food, get some Mountain Dew and Doritos.
So sort of the invention of the artistic pieces would occur back at your family's house where the studios were. So the actual kind of coming up with ideas would happen back there. And then the execution would happen at the shop. Would that be kind of another way of putting it?
Oh yeah, completely. And the original house that my parents lived in, my mom still lives there. It was definitely a showroom for what they could do and be weird and wacky.
Would they have clients come over to your house?
Yeah, oh yeah.
So the house even kind of functioned as part of the business then.
Yeah, so if you walk in through the front door of my mom's house, there's the courtyard. And then when you walk in the front door, there's a mirror. And it's kind of like a false, like, to the... Oh, and then that's to the left. There's a mirror. And then to the right, there's some stairs that go down. And then behind those stairs, there's another mirror, right? Mm-hmm. And then to the right a little bit, there's the stairs that take you up. So no matter what, you think you're going to go left, but you have to go right.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, and so it's definitely a different house, and it has these huge skylights that were definitely skylights from a different building. Originally. They've been replaced now for leaking reasons. There's a big... Whenever it would rain, it would always leak. She would help with the business end of things and the grunt work. I caught up with her and recorded our conversation a couple months ago. Let's roll this tape.
And I started teaching part-time, but basically, he in particular realized we had to find a way to live off of this. And, that's often the artist's dilemma. Okay, I'm an artist, I have a degree, but now, how am I going to make a penny? And, we live in this historically rich neighborhood in Lafayette Square. And so he had some developer buddies who were making new infill housing, but also had to have architectural detail involved. And so we, experimented and learned the craft of making some of these architectural ornamentation with a variety of materials. And that started to grow and developed, and that's when we actually developed Cassilly & Cassilly as a sort of an architectural sculptural firm initially. It was quick because individual house projects or a couple, row houses to suddenly, I think, Jerry King, who developed the Manhattan Muse. I can't remember how many units there were, but there were a lot of them. And they all needed this ornamentation, from cheek stones to cornices, windows, sills, all of that kind of stuff. So we became a real production company at that point, and that's when we had to hire people and get a bigger space because our basement, we started using these, I think they're called polyurethane foams, which swell in the mold and become firm and are very weather resistant, but we knew nothing about that except that the material existed. So we started doing all of these, we had experimented like crazy in the basement. We'd have some of these things that shrunk to like nothing, other things that grew twice the size of what they were supposed to be, other things that mushed up and melted, until finally we got the formula right to make these things. And to this day, those cornice ornamentations are still made out of that product that we started developing here, and it worked. And every developers in particular saw the product, got interested, and bit by bit it grew.
So the using of concrete was a natural progression. It didn't start that way. Did you start by doing initially actual terracotta?
No, because terracotta has to be fired, as you know.
Yeah.
But no, sometimes we would make a sample out of terracotta so we could make a mold off of that, but we didn't do any reproduction in terracotta itself,
I remember
so to
we'd
speak.
drive all over town to pick up those pieces, and I'd have to go to Duke's shop. And
No, we would do cast concrete, but it would have a terracotta-like finish because we would add dyes to the product, so it was basically a colored concrete.
the facade of Cassilly, the Cassilly & Cassilly building, that was almost an ad for what you guys could do. Am I wrong?
Especially when your father put the praying mantis on top of the building, so that everybody driving by
mantis.
Highway 44 saw this gigantic praying mantis, and everybody was like, "What the?" And then saw the building with all the ornamentation on it, and said, "Oh."
Grandma would take me by that every weekend, because she would get me Friday.
Grandma Judy.
Yeah, and her and Grandpa would pick me up, and they'd say, "Wave to the mantis," and I'd wave to the mantis.
Yeah, so, that was what you call free advertising, except it wasn't free to make it, but it was free to put it on a roof.
It's weird when your mom is married to God before she was your mom. Back to Africa.
So you were an art teacher there.
I was. I started the art program there. It was the first program of its kind in that part of Malawi anyway. And they needed that kind of program to graduate. It sounds strange, or to be accredited, I should say, as a secondary school. Sounds strange, but they did. So that's why I went there in the first place, because I had just received my degree and knew enough to do a startup department. The girls loved it, absolutely loved everything we did, from batik to digging clay in the creeks and firing pots, making our own glazes, quarrying stone, carving soapstone, just everything was an adventure. Tons of fun. They loved it. They loved it. We'd have these little exhibits in the art room, and it was a good time. I wrote a little textbook with mimeograph pages, if anybody remembers what the mimeograph is. And,
it's the precursor to the copier, right?
What was the other machine called? The diddle machine? No,
I don't
even remember. But so I wrote this little textbook and, of course, plagiarized a bunch of little stuff from my art books. But out there, I didn't think that was going to be an issue, and it wasn't.
I don't think it is.
No. So I actually can't remember what happened once I left the school, if they continued it or not.
Do you remember the name?
It was in a Likuni secondary school for girls. It was in a little village called Likuni.
L-E-K.
Likuni, Likuni. And it was just about 15 miles from Lilongwe, which was more of a little major city. And so we lived there in the compound, in the school compound, and the girls boarded there. So we were just really one tight-knit community. It was, when I went in, French was one of the major languages, and I didn't know French either. So I learned a little bit of French while I was in the convent, and then they took English became a major secondary language of the group. So we were bilingual basically. So I went to a country that was English speaking as well as Chichewa speaking. Chichewa. And I taught in English, which was required. But I did go to a language course for 3 months when I first got there, and to learn a bit of Chichewa, which helped.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
And I think it's also respectful when you're in a different...
The people would love it when you tried to say something, even if you were, miles wrong. They still acknowledged you and appreciated the effort.
Yeah.
What was after, Lafayette shop, and then what was the next property that they bought to work in? Because there were a couple other subsequent studios, right?
Yeah, there was the Gratiot building. They bought that, and if you need help to remember the name, it's giant, biggest sculpture of a giraffe there.
So, your dad could be petty at times, which I sort of admired, as far as for the giraffe building, for the giraffe sculpture. So it was going to be the tallest, but then it wasn't quite tall enough. So then he added on the...
No. So I don't know if they set out for it to necessarily be the tallest sculpture. If that makes any... but they were it's going to be a tall sculpture. And then they found out that it was... Yeah.
No, that's what I'm saying. It wasn't even the goal necessarily, but once he found out there was another one and it was so close, it's oh, well...
Yeah.
As long as we're here, why don't we make it the tallest one? So they added on the tongue, an extra long giraffe tongue to make sure it was the largest sculpture in Texas.
So yeah, we have this large sculpture in Texas, and my dad wanted to keep making even more art that was huge and breaking world records, and he had taken Texas by storm, and so he was looking for a building with a way higher ceiling, and the Polar Wave Ice building came into his targeted sights. Anyway, I asked my mom about this a couple months ago. Okay, roll the tape.
So the Polar Wave Ice Building.
Mm-hmm.
How long was that owned?
Oh, by us?
Uh-huh.
Not that long. I can't recall exactly. Maybe 4 years or something like that. Maybe a little longer. But I think the only thing in there at the time was I think it was being rented for truck storage or something like that, freight storage. And so it was they had big oil pits from these trucks, draining the old dirty oil. I mean, literally like 3 feet deep, kind of holes everywhere. You had to be very careful where you were walking.
I remember.
Yeah, and some people weren't. And so Bob, of course, adored space. What he loved about this was the space, the height of the ceilings. I don't know what that was, but it was extremely high. And so that was always excited to him because he thought he could build something huge, So, but the other thing I think he realized right from the beginning, and I'm pretty sure this is true, is that this building was fairly close to the property of Missouri Botanical Gardens. And I don't know if he thought that they would someday expand or need it, or just kind of, it was a speculation or an intuition or what it was. But sure enough, that came true. And they did need it and come knocking, wanting to buy the building for their research center, which is still there. I think, yes, it is. So, that was an opportunity to, I think we paid $60,000 for that building at the time, which was a crazy price for a building that big, but it did have a lot of environmental issues.
Yeah, I remember it was a chemical spill, basically.
Yeah, it was not something that most people would want. And of course, we didn't have a lot of money, or not at all, but my mother stepped in and I think she lent us $20,000, so that helped get us there. So we went from there to, selling it at a gigantic profit to be able to shop for something much bigger. And Bob had always been interested in owning a property in downtown St. Louis. And again, the bigger the better. And that's when, the International Shoe Company came into focus. And, the rest of that is history.
Yeah. What I'm trying to figure out is, where did the genesis for the fish tank and all that stuff come from?
I don't know what came first, but I know that one of the first ideas your dad had when we started to have some money to develop the bottom floor of the back building. Now, each floor in that, there's 10 stories, but each floor is 60,000 square feet. And so he had this idea to build an aquarium. At that point, St. Louis didn't have much of an aquarium, except I think Leonard's aquarium did exist, but so because we would be on ground floor, weight-wise, it could accommodate a lot of water and weight. Yeah. And so that, that was the initial idea. And as we started to decide or discover that we knew nothing about keeping fish alive, that idea kind of started to morph into something else. Yeah. But we did keep a fish tank, one fish tank at the time. So now there's more.
Leonard was never scheduled to have it was just like a seed.
No, I don't believe Leonard was going to participate in any of that early adventure. Leonard came into the scene later to take over an area and really have his own project.
Way before the museum, they were redoing the front building.
Correct.
And we pulled up the carpet, and there was that really nice granite from the original building, and it being an aha moment for the whole project. Yeah. And it definitely started as a blueprint for uncovering this terrible renovation job that had been done probably 20 years before in the 70s. And it was just peeling back that and exposing the actual building that was still there almost, and then adding the Cassilly touch, if you will.
Yeah, we started trying to salvage and refinish parts, some of the floors of that building because there's a ton of water damage.
Oh yeah,
and flooding and, a lot of warped and rotten, moldy everything.
It was everywhere. It was terrible. They had to redo every wood floor.
So, we started fixing up smaller areas at a time, and the idea was to find tenants, and that tenant income would then enable Bob to start thinking about bigger projects and have extra money in his pocket to develop something else in the bigger part of the building, which was the back part of the building, the warehouse, which was really what it was interested in right from the beginning.
So that's really what it is. We'll leave you there with that interview with my mom. You can hear more on our Patreon. I have some behind-the-scenes stuff, and I interviewed her at her house, which was the original Caroline Mission and where Cassilly and Cassilly originally started. And it's a really interesting house. Christian mission. And
yeah, because it very much is different than all the other houses on the street.
Yeah, it's set back.
Right. Set back a whole bunch. There's not really any backyard at all, right?
Correct.
The house sits
There's
right
no
on the
backyard.
The house sits on the alley line.
Yeah, and you could load in all your gear for making stuff just right in.
I bet that was really appealing to your parents.
Yes. And so, my mom and my dad started it out of the basement there. Because my dad was flipping houses before that.
Really? So you renovated houses?
He did. I think in all the photos of him and his first wife, they're up on the corner house on Hickory.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Hickory and 18th?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, we would go to the shop, which the facade of the shop is amalgamation of a couple different things, different projects of his. And there's one that is the Manhattan townhouses, I believe.
Yeah.
It was at least designed at the same time, maybe not used in it, because I believe they're a little bit different.
And that was very much, that front was made up of, I'd call it a pastiche, which is a combination and conglomeration of a bunch of different works of art combined together into something new.
Correct.
And in the art history world, sometimes the word pastiche can be a little bit of a dirty word, particularly in the museum world, because back in the 19th century, unscrupulous art dealers, what they would do is they'd take pieces from different works of art, and maybe a lot of it was damaged, so they just take the undamaged pieces of from a work of art and they'd combine them together to create a new work of art, which obviously isn't very honest. But in this instance, pastiche is actually very much a compliment, because your parents combined together these various different disparate elements and made something that's really a very beautiful, cogent whole, in my opinion.
Some of my first memories are of the shop.
Really?
Yeah.
Like what?
Dusty. A lot of it's the smell.
What kind of smells? What does it smell like? All this.
Concrete smells pretty earthy.
Right.
One of my most fondest memories is of my grandfather whistling while working in the wood shop. I would eat lunch up there, surrounded by the scent of wood and the hum of creativity. Over the years, we've seen so many places transform into cherished memories. I truly appreciate the attention everyone has paid to the Cassilly shop. Thank you, Jackie Dana, for everything that you've done so far. It's overwhelming in the best way. Our next episode should be an episode about Bill Chrisman. He is one of the original artists who helped start City Museum with my parents. He started Beatnik Bob's, and he also started Joe's Cafe. Who was Joe? Was Joe a person? Find out next episode. How can you help? Join our Patreon for $5 or $10 and get ad-free content, exclusive videos, full interviews, and more. Also, if you would please share the love, if you can't become a patron, please leave a review and share our podcast on your social media channels. An insightful sneak peek of our conversation with Bill Chrisman, taken a couple years ago, actually, at this point.
Hello, Lucky Dog.
Hello, Lucky.
Let's see. All right, so...
You ready?
Do you have your questions ready?
No. Yes.
I have to write my own goddamn questions?
No.
Can I use the word motherfucker on the tape with impunity?
Doesn't matter to me. Worst case, we'll bleep you, but we'll try and find like a good
You know what?
bleep noise.
When I was down in Florida, I was reading this guy's memoirs, and he said, technically speaking, wouldn't your father be a mother?
Bleep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Everybody's father.
Everyone's father.
So it should say happy
Bleep,
Father's
bleep.
Day.
Yeah.
Happy Father's Day. Connecting with
Oh, yeah.
Are you sure about that?
it. Why not? What the hell?
This has been a Captured Planet production. Goodbye now.